Kain as a person is always fascinating to speak to.
We've got Kain Warwick today, a leader in the crypto world.
The breadth of his knowledge is pretty phenomenal.
You do a lot these days.
A friend actually sent me an article about Kain and I was just like, this guy is incredible.
Really a pioneer, I would say, in the Australian crypto space particularly as well.
Let's call it decentralized finance.
He's definitely one of the founders of DeFi, I guess. He's very competitive.
This guy's clearly been playing on the weekend.
In combination with being very driven.
He's the big time.
Just trying to keep it like a bit minimal, but something that feels comfortable that people want to hang out in. Synthetix is much more like an open source software project than it is a traditional company. This is Studio A. Synthetix for a long time only had 8 full-time people working on it. Now that's up to 40 or 50. And then up here is going to be the office. Cafe on the left here, give it a nice little atmosphere. Synthetix allows people to hold tokens that give them price exposure to real-world assets. So things like gold, silver, even crypto assets like Bitcoin. For someone who is skeptical of whether blockchain is going to be something that is transformative, it doesn't matter whether you believe it. You cannot believe in gravity, but gravity is still going to bring you to the ground. So hopefully, early next year, it'll be ready to go. I've always wanted to be the best at whatever I'm doing. And I suppose that comes from my upbringing. I've always been a bit anti-authoritarian. I came from a household that was fairly strict, and I'm the oldest of 4 boys.
Jesus, I don't even know if I can serve anymore.
Yeah, we lived on the courts, yeah. So that was my bedroom up there. We lived there.
My dad was a professional athlete. He was a tennis player. The year I was born, he got to the final of the Australian Open. It was definitely an interesting dynamic in my household. It was very competitive.
All right, I'll switch rackets with you. No excuses.
It was always 2-on-2 everything, 2-on-2, basketball, 2-on-2 football, 2-on-2 soccer.
We used to play 2-on-2 on that court there.
Coming from that competitive environment, I knew early on that I wanted my own independence.
This is changed. That wasn't here. That
Oh,
was
yeah,
in the
that's-
canteen.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
the
that's
canteen was
Oh,
there.
and the restring machine's over here now. Okay.
I used to kind of think up ideas of how I could make money. When I was 13, I started restringing rackets at my parents' tennis center.
It's been a while.
I don't think he's going to be able to do it. We used to time ourselves as well, obviously. Yeah.
The way that the business was being run was not really optimal. And so I went to my parents and I said, what if I take it over so you don't have to deal with it?
Yeah, he had a business in here. He had a business out there with arcade machines.
Yeah, we bought arcade machines and charged $2 per play.
I increased the efficiency and I set up some processes and the profitability went up, by like 60 or 70%. So I think at that time I was maybe 15. I want to say I was making, maybe $50,000 to $100,000 a year. And my parents kind of looked at the amount of money that I was making from this restringing business. And they said, listen, we think it's really important that you focus on school. So we're going to take this business back from you and get you to focus on school. I wasn't super happy about it. No, that kind of craving for, being able to kind of have independence and be able to, go and do what I wanted to do became, more and more of a driving force. The idea of building things and doing hard things to me is kind of satisfying in its own right. I was doing a genetics degree, and so it was a lot of organic chemistry, which, a lot of memorization. I just wasn't a big fan of it. And yeah, when the opportunity arose, I left uni and moved over to Seattle and joined a startup. I kind of ran their networking and set up all of the computers for everyone and was, kind of like the IT manager. But unfortunately, while they were kind of negotiating and going back and forth on this, the market crashed. They ran out of money. The founders obviously were a bit jaded and, felt like the market had kind of screwed them over. So I was basically the person that was trying to salvage the business in the end. I think I was the only person that was happy there. there were no constraints, right? You could do whatever you wanted to do. You could take the problem that you were given and come up with a solution. And that was literally what every day was about. It was like, okay, we've got this problem, what's the solution? We've got another problem, what's the solution? Which, feels very similar to crypto these days. I think when you have a very stressful situation, it's really hard to kind of detach yourself and remain unemotional about it. I've always just found it easier to kind of detach myself and really kind of zero in on the problem. That's been my kind of coping mechanism, I guess, which works out really well in high stress situations, right? You can just kind of sit there and focus on the problem.
He wasn't successful straight off the bat. A number of startups with kind of varying success, but he kept going and he saw the potential of crypto a lot earlier than so many people. And in this kind of space, timing really matters.
After the startup shut down, I moved to California and I decided to go back to school. Did that for a couple of years while I coached tennis. And then I moved to Boston and started a band.
We were playing decent sized shows, like opening for bands that were playing to 500 to 1,000 people or whatever.
I'd been away for about 10 years and I was like, all right, I think it's maybe time for me to go back to Sydney. I ran a store there for a couple of years. One of my mentors approached me and said, hey, I've got this guy, he wants to start this startup. What do you think? So in 2014, we started Blueshift, and by the time we got to late 2017, I think 80% of our revenue was coming from crypto. We just had to make a decision to pivot.
Join us in creating the future of money.
That was the genesis of Haven. Then around 2018, we made the decision to pivot again to a more generalized synthetic asset platform, and that was Synthetix. I guess sometimes the path is not obvious, and a lot of times founders get advice that they should do something that they're passionate about. The challenge when you do something that you really care about is you can get wedded to the idea or wedded to the solution, and it makes it really hard to pivot. Balance of probabilities say that whatever the first thing you do is most likely going to fail. You can push things too far and take it to a point where there's no recovery. In the early days, we were sort of forced to do everything ourselves. Most things hadn't yet launched on mainnet, but as new tooling like Chainlink was developed, we were able to rely on external projects in a way that took a lot of pressure off us. That is one of the kind of superpowers of crypto, that you have all of these tools that are available that are open source. The day when we kind of switched everything over to Chainlink, I think everyone on the Synthetix team slept a lot better from that day forward. The incentive alignment in open source software is a cultural one. People are contributing, not because they have some financial alignment, but because, they genuinely want to contribute. You can go into a Discord and it's as if you could just walk into the office of a company and sit down next to someone and be like, hey, what are you up to today? That's unimaginable in, the traditional corporate world, right? You can't just turn up and walk into a boardroom and be like, what are we talking about? As a founder, letting go of control can be very difficult, but eventually the protocol is owned by the community. And at this point, that's where we're at. I don't run Synthetix. I don't work for Synthetix directly. I'm not paid to work on Synthetix. So I'm, as much a community contributor as anyone else. Building communities and getting people to buy into an idea is certainly critical. Competition and markets are the way that the world progresses. And so when you have efficient, open, transparent markets, you have the ability to kind of innovate as a society, as a culture. And when you lower barriers to entry, you just get a better world. DeFi gives you the most fair and transparent and open markets that you can really imagine. There aren't gatekeepers. These days, I think there are much better solutions that are out there in open source, so it's much easier to launch a new project today than it was back then. Everything is open, everyone can see how people are doing things, and that allows for people to innovate much faster, cost a lot less. This is genuinely going to change the world. That's why it's so exciting, because you can't even imagine the things that it will be able to do.